And a very good morning to you. We're live in London and you're with Monocle on Sunday with me, Emma Nelson. Coming up on today's programme, my guests share their views on the week's biggest stories. Alex von Tunzelmann and Charles Hecker are standing by. Alex, good morning. What have you spotted?
Well, I'm very interested in a story in the FT that Nigeria is cracking down on money spraying at parties amid fears that it might be devaluing the naira.
Can't wait. Chuck, what have you spotted?
Elon Musk has left the house, and we're talking about the White House. The man who once wielded an axe to the federal government has been axed from Doge.
Thank you for that indeed. We'll be checking in with the latest on the Polish presidential elections, and we'll hear the news from the Bosporus.
I'm Hannah Lucinda Smith in Istanbul, and coming up, I'll be talking about President Erdogan's plans for a new constitution, water shortages in Istanbul, and the celebrations for the Ottoman conquest of Istanbul.
Plus, our editorial director, Tyler Brûlé, is out and about in Lisbon. It's the 1st of June 2025, live from London. This is Monocle on Sunday.
Live from London, this is Monocle on Sunday with Emma Nelson.
Welcome everybody to a bright and breezy Sunday morning here in London. Chuck, Charles, I'll never get your name right. And Alex, how are we doing? How was your week?
Oh, well, I mean, not terribly eventful, which is a very boring thing to say on the radio on a Sunday morning.
Don't do that.
It's been very nice that the weather's been improving
Yes.
a bit. So actually, I've been enjoying being outside a little more. You never quite know with the British summer.
We saw the sky this week. How about you, Charles?
Been doing quite a bit of running around lately, and I'm very happy to be back in London, sleeping in my own bed and getting once again accustomed to the normal rhythms of life.
And what have you noticed about the normal rhythms of life when you're back in London? The bit that you just think, oh, I'd forgotten that that's an integral part of just what is happening here.
One of the most important parts of the rhythm of life in London is my sofa, where I have been spending an inordinate amount of time flat on my back. London has an interesting rhythm. It's generally speaking faster than most of the places that I've been lately. I'm happy for that. But lately I've sort of been dipping in and out of it a little bit more carefully than usual.
Okay, thank you for that. Right, let us head to a place where the pace of life is slightly different to that from London. I'm talking about Lisbon. Our editorial director, Tyler Brûlé, has been out stretching his legs and has just come back. Good morning, Tyler. How are you?
Good morning, Emma. I'm very well. How are you?
Very well, thank you. And how is Lisbon looking this morning? You have actually been for a constitutional already, haven't you?
I have bright and early. Still, well, kind of on Asia time. Just got back from a very happy little tour across Asia just across the last week. But Lisbon's looking nice because, as we were checking in across the springtime, it's been extraordinarily, just damp and wet and not a great spring. But summer is definitely here. 30 degrees yesterday, it'll be about the same today. And the city's in a bit of a design groove. It's sort of the tail end of the design week. Also, Arco Lisboa, which is, of course, the cousin of the Arco Madrid Art Fair, also on here as well.
Good to hear it. So tell us about your peppy little tour around the Far East was more than what many people would describe as peppy. I think it's sort of gravity-defying. Where did we begin?
We began in Japan. We started in Tokyo last Monday, and that was just checking in what is also a rapidly expanding Monocle bureau there. A new sub-editor we have in place. Of course, you've probably dealt with Ryoma, one of our new radio producers and engineers based there. Of course, news reading also coming out of Tokyo as well. So it's just, that's also a bit of a buzzy office again. And it was just great to catch up with the team, talk about some of the things that we're going to be doing, and just a lot of traffic through there. Our Josh Fennert is going to be in Tokyo as well. And just, interesting to see the lay of the land in Japan. Of course, I don't know why people would go any time from, let's say, mid-May through again until October because it gets so warm. But there are no shortage of tourists. It just continues to be an absolute crush of people from all over the world.
And that crush, does that actually get in the way of daily life, or are you able to find some breathing space?
You are. I think this is the great thing. We were in Osaka. I mean, even, of course, just being in and around Tomigaya, where we are, where the bureau is, and our shop in Tokyo. It's a very busy part of the city near Yoyogi Park. But the great thing is, you have lots of people from all over the world sort of barreling down main streets. But then you just have to take a right or a left, and suddenly you're just back in sort of tranquil Tokyo as it used to be. So there's listen, I would say 98% of the city you can still, of course, feel that there's no extraordinary tourist boom as has been happening there, of course, since the back end of the pandemic.
Which is absolutely reassuring to hear. Did you make it? You said you talk about Osaka. Did you make it to the expo?
Yes, indeed. Went down to Osaka on Wednesday. I think readers will have seen that we've been doing a little bit of work with Austria, with the Austrian Economic Board or Ministry, and that has been sort of talking about the relationship between Austria and Japan. So it's a real sort of marker. You would say that this expo, there's really a coming together. It's been very important for Austria to make its mark in terms of its long-standing diplomatic and cultural relationship with Japan as well. Of course, getting on the Shinkansen down to from Tokyo Station down to Osaka, though, it's just a bit of a challenge because you just think, oh my goodness, the sheer amount of, I would say, sort of, guides, call them hosts, but just all of these people who are just reminding tourists how to travel, how one behaves on a Japanese train. I'm not sure what it's done for the numbers for Japan Rail because there must be such of course, it's great the trains are full, but what an uptick is just the amount of staff that they need to deploy just to, of course, keep people in check.
And this is brilliant. I mean, what does one not do on a Shinkansen that requires someone to tell you to behave?
Well, you don't take a minivan size suitcase with you, that's for sure, or at least not 5 of them when there's only 2 of you traveling. This is the one just incredible thing. I'm thinking, are these people on a 5-year world tour? But there can't be that many people who are traveling around the world for years at a time. I think most of these people are probably only traveling for 10 days, and they take everything with them. They must have blow-up beds. It amazes me. And then, of course, you're trying to. And you could probably argue as well. The Shinkansen was built for long weekends. It's built for people who head down to Kobe for the day for business or one night and back. It was never engineered or designed for just this crush of people with the biggest wheelie suitcase in the world. Okay,
do we know what's in these bags? Because I suspect it's probably quite a lot of hair products.
There could be a lot of hair products. I have a sense that these are not empty cases that people think, oh, I'm going to go and fill these with, just great Japanese ceramics and wonderful woven items. I think these are just people who simply don't know how to pack.
Excellent.
And don't realize actually that you don't need that much clothing at this time of year. But at the same time, though, I was thinking what happened to just common decency, in a public environment, that it is. The uniform it's a cycling short, men and women, and just tank tops and a Hoka trainer, and that's a lot on a lot of people. Is there a lot of information?
Is there a lot of midriff?
There's midriff. Of course, you don't get a lot of midriff because you would know, being of course an aficionado on cycling shorts. You also have like the cycling short now that just comes up basically under your breastbone. So listen, we don't need to paint any more pictures for our listeners this morning. The headline is, though, heading to Japan, dress coolly, but dress up and cover up a little bit as well.
Yes, please wear trousers. So once you got to the expo, there was a thing with Austria, and you were having to calm down after seeing all the flesh. But the atmosphere itself at the expo, I mean, clearly all the eyes are on Japan to see how Osaka does this a second time, having been such a successful time 50 years ago. What's the sort of the general impression of it?
Well, I guess on one side, it's like so many expos we've seen. This is about reclaiming a certain part of the city. So it's a bit of a hike to get out there. There's of course plenty of public infrastructure. We had our nice driver, Mr. Kuriyama, in the back seat of a Toyota Crown, which was perfectly fine. We also had the Austrian delegation look after us in terms of getting you in with a proper pass, etc. And this is the thing: we know the Japanese love to queue. They don't mind waiting an hour to get into any number of pavilions. And this is the thing: it is absolutely enormous. So much of the world is represented, and so really at a clip, you could probably only see 7 or 8. If you wanted to see sort of like the countries, you wouldn't be able to probably fit in many more, because like the queue to get into France, for example, the queue to get into the Italian pavilion, absolutely rammed. And this sort of Wednesday midday in May, around no significant public holidays. So it was incredible to see. And what's interesting about this expo, though, it is very much a Japanese affair. They want Taiwanese to come, they want Australians to come, and maybe that will sort of change in the summer or as we move into autumn. But this is really the world coming to Japan at an interesting time when actually we've seen that Japan is not going out to the world. We were chatting to one of the CEOs of course, one of the major airlines in Japan also this week, and he was just saying that the Japanese are simply, especially young Japanese, are not flying. They're not leaving the country. So the world has come to them.
Which is astonishing and incredibly good news for Japan. You flew on, though, and you ended up at Hong Kong Airport, which is expanding apace.
We left Osaka Airport. KIX Airport also has been through a much-needed renovation. It's one of these reclaimed islands as well. So that was looking better. But I know there's just something when you're reminded, Emma, when you're in Asia or when you sort of just head east of Europe, how the world builds at speed. And it was interesting because we were talking to one of our retail partners in Hong Kong, and they said, the big Terminal 2 development, et cetera, which is coming on stream, et cetera. And I was like, okay, well, I'm thinking in my mind, this is going to be, are we 10 years out? How long until this thing happens? They said, no, it's going to be done in 2027. And sure enough, when I took off for Bangkok the other morning, as we went up, it looks like this Terminal 2 is almost finished. It was absolute. It's mammoth. It's almost as big as the existing Hong Kong airport as we know it. And of course, here we sit in much of the West, where it's very, it's complicated. I was looking at Zurich Airport the other day. They're trying to build a temporary structure, which, by would say Hong Kong standards is like a garden shed. They won't even start laying the foundation for a temporary building until 2027, and no sort of end in sight as to when they will finish, the next terminal. And we're talking about Switzerland. We're talking about, the land of efficiency in building in Western Europe. So I don't know. You just sort of sigh and think, I don't know how we're going to do things on this side of the world when you look at the pace which China, Vietnam, Thailand all move.
It is an astonishing sort of tale of two completely different approaches. I want to draw your attention actually to a story that's just broken in the South China Morning Post, and talking about the appropriateness of things that you take on trains and planes. We've already had the Lycra, so enough there. But just on the South China Morning Post headline, it says Hong Kong Airlines is expanding its services that allows passengers to bring their pets into cabins. Apparently, it's all been filled up until mid-November, and they're going to allow more dogs and cats in boxes, but they're also going to be a bit more family friendly, that are going to be a bit more friendly to the elderly, to try and make it easier to get on and off planes. So more old people and dogs on planes. How are we feeling about that, Tyler?
Well, listen, I don't know. I think dogs for 2 hour flights, fine. But when I hear that someone is taking their dog, from in the cabin from Los Angeles to London, I just think 15 hours for this poor animal with no proper toilet facilities. I think problematic. But yes, I think your other point, though, we really have to think through how the elderly travel and how they travel well. And I think that, of course, Japan. Certainly the likes of Hong Kong, many places are seeing this demographic crunch, which we're starting to come to terms with it in the West. But you just realize, and just going back to Japan for a moment, how they're so far, they're just so far ahead when you think about how people are and how society is dealing with older people, and whether that is getting them from A to B in the air, on rail, or just in daily life, Emma. I mean, it seems like all of the major automotive players in Japan have some type of family vehicle which is, completely equipped to deal with a wheelchair, and these are, whether they're sort of low step vans, whatever it is, and we just don't have these category of vehicles as part of a regular lineup in Europe, let alone North America. And I think that's just one of the refreshing things to see. So I would say, great for Hong Kong Carrier to be recognizing this. Dogs, one thing. I would put the elderly probably ahead of the queue, though.
Thank you so much, Tyler Brûlé in Lisbon, for joining us to bring us up to date on his travels. You're listening to Monocle on Sunday. Joining me in the studio, Alex von Tunzelmann and Chuck Hecker. Dogs on planes, always a winner. A 15-hour flight from LA to Tokyo is not going to be good for any kind of small dog, have we? I don't think I've been on a plane for a long time with a dog next to me. I'm not entirely sure. I've been on a plane with quite a few grandmas and children next to me, and that's one thing. But a dog in a box? Or a cat in a box?
I mean, I'm quite in favour as a pet owner because the idea of having the poor thing in the hold is also, I think, very frightening. When you can't see your pet and it might get offloaded in the wrong place or any of this, I think to keep...
It's not the welfare of the pet, it's whether it's going to end up in Rotterdam, in Amsterdam or
yes,
Dakar.
That's also a bit of an issue. Yes, exactly. Misdelivered luggage with the pet. So, I mean, I quite like the idea of the pet being under the seat in front of me. But on the other hand, I suppose, I think what's probably going to be the pushback on this is, of course, people with allergies who are not going to be terribly happy about a dog or cat.
Big fluffy cat.
Yes, exactly.
With recycled air.
Yes.
They can go around and spray it, but not so much when it's actually got tiddles in the box. How about you, Chuck? Have you sat next to animals in planes? You're a seasoned traveller.
I'm a seasoned traveler. I'm a huge dog lover. So the more time that I spend around dogs, the better. The only problem is that I like really, really big, stupid dogs. And those aren't always the best traveling companions on airplanes strictly because of their size. I think spending 15 hours next to a sort of yappy small dog might be a bit unpleasant, although you're absolutely right, Alex. You wouldn't want to see them suffering in the hold where it's either too cold or too hot. And no facilities for hygiene purposes.
Or for walkies. I mean, when you've got the Weimaraner strapped in next to you with its seatbelt fastened.
No.
What do you do when he wants to go for a little trot?
No, walking up and... Well, it's bad enough when I want to go for a little trot up and down the aisle. So even harder imagining if you had 4 legs rather than 2. Look, we should be accommodating to people and all of their various needs, and we should be kind to animal travelers within reason. Dog sitting services, I think, are a fantastic invention, and the more we can avail ourselves of those sorts of innovations, the better.
I mean, this thing's amazing. It says each flight can provide 2 to 6 pet in-cabin seats. So the dog, Diddles or Rover gets its own seat.
I mean, I suppose that's the thing, because last night I was having a lovely drink in the park next to a Rhodesian Ridgeback, and I have to say it was an absolutely gorgeous dog, but the thought of that under the seat is not going to happen. I mean, it's not going there, this thing. And then they said, oh, it's just a puppy. And I thought, my God, it's basically a horse. So I suspect Chuck might be right that there's a bit of a size limit at some point.
Well, then what do you do? Do you have to order a special meal, or how do they get fed? Do you sort of bring your own kibble on board, or is there sort of kibble department now in the trolley?
I don't know. Can you imagine trying to get the water bowl down the aisle?
Well, there you go.
It'd be even better. Let's have a quick look at what's happening in the news. Alex, what do you want to start off with? We're going to cross to Poland in a minute, but while we're getting in touch with our correspondent in Poland to talk about the elections, anything that's caught your eye briefly?
Well, Chuck was mentioning earlier, and I think perhaps the kind of biggest news story of the week is about what's happening with Elon Musk in Washington. It seems lots of reports that he's being kind of pushed out, although also some suggestion that this is a bit of smoke and mirrors and Trump saying he's not really going anywhere. So a bit of confusion over that. And then a sort of added piece of the puzzle yesterday, I think it was, or the day before, when he turned up in the White House with a black eye that he said was the result of being punched by one of his many children. I suspect there's quite a long queue of people wanting to punch Elon Musk. I mean, allegedly part of the reason for the departure was a physical altercation in the White House with the Treasury Secretary. So who knows what is going on?
It's been played down quite a lot because there didn't seem to be much build-up to this. And I remember at the beginning of the year, Charles, when we were looking ahead to 2025, and there seemed to be quite a lot of doom and gloom on the horizon. And you said that the one thing that you were looking forward to was the bust-up between Trump and Musk.
That's right.
And it didn't seem to be a bust-up at all. It just seemed to be a sort of a fizzling out.
Well, at least we know that the black eye that and you just can't beat the symbolism of all of this, and that is Elon Musk turning up in the Oval Office with a shiner on the day that he's essentially being sort of bustled out of Washington. But look, I mean, we did look forward to the bust up between Trump and Musk, and it hasn't been dramatic, although something happened right after Musk was relieved of his official duties in Washington, and that is that Donald Trump pulled the rug out from under the nominee to become the new head of NASA. And this is somebody that Elon Musk had personally shepherded into that position. And of course, he had done that with the intent of, with the understanding that all of SpaceX's and Starlink's contracts with NASA would not only be improved, but would probably be expanded and enhanced. And so I think, in addition to the black eye that he came into the Oval Office with, he's probably left with a little bit of a kick to the trousers because he's had one of his main point men in Washington thrown out. And so Trump got his own back and had the last word on this. Elon Musk will not be missed by anybody. He was one of the most hated men in Washington, and Alex is absolutely right to point out that one of the main points of conflict was with the rest of the cabinet. But really, his popularity publicly plummeted. That's an awful lot of P's there. And it was all shown in the bottom line of what's going on with Tesla. Sales have plummeted. He's going back ostensibly to grab the reins of Tesla more carefully and return the company to its robust former state.
When we look at Elon Musk's 130 days in the White House, what will his legacy be? Do we know, if we could just sort of pinpoint the key points to it? Because he came in a blaze of chainsaws, and yet one very much got the impression that things didn't go the way he wanted it to.
Well, I think we perhaps underestimate how much they did. I mean, he has been able to stop investigations into his companies from a lot of departments. He has been able to avail himself of ever more government contracts, and perhaps specifically in the case of the ailing Tesla, that might well help prop him up for some time. He's also probably been able to steal the personal data of every American, which is now being passed potentially to Palantir for processing. And I think also, I do think, from what I understand from friends in Washington, it's absolutely right that he's fallen out with the cabinet and has no friends there, and with people like Bessette and Stephen Miller and so on. However, Trump still personally seems to like him. The two of them actually still, I don't think they have had their bust up yet. I think that may be still to come, who can say? But I don't think it's happened at present. So I think in a way, he's probably achieved an awful lot of what he wanted. I mean, from the point of view of legacy, of course, we also to say that because of his cuts at USAID and so on, there's already been an estimated 300,000 excess deaths as a result of those cuts, largely in the third world.
Thank you for that. Let's head to Poland now, because voting is underway in the presidential election. In a second-round runoff, the pro-EU liberal Rafał Trzaskowski is polling neck and neck with his right-wing populist rival Karol Nawrocki. Let's hear now from Mateusz Mazzini, who's writer-at-large at Gazeta Wyborcza and lecturer in journalism at Collegium Civitas, now from Wisla. Good morning to you, Mateusz. Polls have opened. How's it going?
Well, good morning to all of you. It's going to be a very close election and nerve-wracking rest of the day. We have already had reports of record turnout. Obviously, we don't know yet, as for now, how many people voted comparatively to previous elections, but there are plenty of social media posts about people turning up to the polls before they opened at 7 a.m. and already finding several people lined up to vote. This is going to be an exceptionally important election, especially for the diaspora. We have an absolutely record number of 700,000 Poles registered to vote abroad, which is over 200,000 more than 2 weeks ago. It's 180,000 alone in the United Kingdom. So this is going to be a very important election also for those people, because for all intents and purposes, it seems to be the case that it might be actually the foreign vote that will decide the overall outcome.
And that is an important element when it comes to looking at the two candidates, doesn't it? Because if we have the mayor of Warsaw, Rafał Trzaskowski, neck and neck with his populist rival, Karol Nawrocki, it's a little bit. It feels a little bit like what happened in Romania a few weeks ago when you had a populist right wing taking on liberals, and in many ways, it's something that determines the future of Poland for the next 4 to 5 years.
I would even go as far as to say that this is a pivotal election for the rest of Europe, at least for the Central and Eastern European region, because you're absolutely right to compare this to the Romanian election. In fact, we had both of the Romanian second-round candidates taking an active stance in the Polish campaign, because first Gheorghe Simion, the far-right candidate who eventually lost in Romania, came to support Karol Nawrocki during one of his rallies. And then in between the first and the second round, we had two major parades of rival candidates in Warsaw, and the liberal one was actually attended by Nicu Jordan, who was the liberal candidate in Romania, elected eventually to be the president. It has a lot of echoes of Romania. It has a lot of echoes of America, with some of the MAGA officials are also actively taking sides in this election. But should Poland actually elect a liberal president rather than a populist right-wing one, it will actually cement its growing position in the institutional framework of the West. And a return to a populist nationalist governance would probably accelerate a shift eastwards, somehow closer to more authoritarian frameworks, and certainly less cooperative with traditional Western democracies, traditional partners of Poland.
Because at the moment, in the last few years at least, we've seen Donald Tusk and his centre party finding it really difficult to get any of their policies through and their election ambitions through, given the fact that there has been a right-wing figure in the presidential seat up until now. And it's sort of caused lots of blockades for Poland, hasn't it?
Well, that's certainly one of the main reasons, but we also need to remember that Tusk governs a very complex and mutually contradictory sometimes coalition of many different parties. You have the Christian Democrats, you have the left, you have the sort of center-right pro-European main party that's the engine of the coalition. They don't actually agree on many things. And this is, in large, I think, the main difference between democratic and populist politics. That in an electoral democracy, in a deliberative democracy in which you have to agree on a number of policies for them to be advanced, it takes way more time. Whereas within the populist framework, when you have a more authoritarian or sort of more illiberal government that doesn't really care about standards, that's actually willing to bend the law at the expense, or let's say in favor of efficiency, the electorate is very much accustomed to the government delivering, because the roadblocks are not there anymore. And this is very much the problem that Tusk is facing, that he really needs to work through some certain very important, very difficult compromises within the coalition to get anything done out of the government. And then on top of that, he had a president was supported by the previous government, supported by Law and Justice, who wasn't cooperative in any way, shape or form. So this is, I guess, going to be a referendum on whether the Polish society is willing to give Tusk another chance to pass some of his most important reforms, or whether the right-wing narrative of overthrowing the current government and returning to the ideas of law and justice will prevail.
Mateusz, stay with us, because I've got Charles Hacker and Alexon Tunzelmann in the studio with me. I mean, Charles, you nodded vigorously when Mateusz mentioned the idea of this election not just being important for Poland, but for Europe.
Yeah, you can't think of an election right now that serves as a better global bellwether for what's happening politically around the world. I mean, it appears that the Polish elections really are taking place on three different levels. You know, first and foremost, this is an expression of the Polish voters' will and the narrowing down to two candidates of a field that initially began with 13 candidates, and sort of pits the sort of more conservative rural population against coastal and western cities as far as, you know, sort of left versus right. And so that's what's happening domestically. realistically, Poland is absolutely critical and central to what's happening to Europe. And don't forget, of course, that Donald Tusk was president of the European Council for a number of years prior to becoming prime minister of Poland. Poland is absolutely central to European defense and is central to what's happening with Ukraine. You can imagine also that Viktor Orban of Hungary is watching this very, very closely to see which way the wind is blowing as far as his political fortunes are concerned. And then finally, there is an international, a global dimension to all of this. Can you imagine? I mean, Kristi Noem, who's the Secretary of Homeland Security, came to Poland, spoke at a CPAC convention, a conservative right-wing convention in Poland, and told Poles who to vote for, and told them to vote for the right-wing candidate and called the left-wing candidate a train wreck of a candidate. Can you imagine what would happen if the Polish interior minister went to Washington and told Americans how to vote? And so we've got another one of these sort of MAGA-backed referendums, and we know what happened in Romania, we know what happened in Australia, we know what happened in Canada to MAGA-backed candidates, and so we're waiting for this, the result of yet another litmus test in Poland.
Mateusz, just coming back to you on this one, the polls going into this election suggest that it's absolutely neck and neck, which is sort of what we saw in Romania. It's sort of what we saw in Canada and Australia. Is there a sense that in actual fact that Poland will do what all those other countries has done, which is sort of held their nose and gone for pro-Europe and pro-liberal?
Well, I think we're not going to know until the early hours of Monday morning. The first exit poll is going to be released, two of them, in fact, because for the first time in the history of Polish presidential election, we are going to have two separate research institutions doing two parallel exit polls. They're going to be released around 9 p.m. Warsaw time, which is 8 p.m. London. But I'm betting that the leading candidates, in fact, will be switching places twice or even three times overnight, mostly because the exit poll will not take into consideration the vote cast abroad. And as I said before, this is going to be a very important fraction of the electorate, because if the turnout is as high as we can forecast for now, so within the bracket of maybe 74-75%, which is the highest ever in the democratic history of Poland, it will be the foreign vote, because it will weight around 2.5 percentage point. And given the popularity, the immense popularity of the Warsaw mayor within the diaspora, a much greater share of that vote will probably go in his favor. So by the time these votes are counted somewhere in London or New York or Australia or other places, we will have to wait. But it very much does feel like the closer we get to the election day, the more people come to realize that this isn't going to just be a normal election. This is very much an election that decides the future path of the country. So using the narratives or rhetorics of the far right, this in fact is a referendum, but it might not be a referendum on the government. It might be the referendum of where you see your country geopolitically and geostrategically within the next 2, 4, or 5 years.
Mateusz Mazzini, thank you so much for joining us on Monocle on Sunday. Listening to that, Alex, the idea that, a presidential election with so many areas of interest which have such widespread relevance, it's quite an astonishing moment, isn't it?
It's a really important moment, I think, and I think, as Mateusz said, for the whole of Europe, actually, this is really quite significant. And, it's been sort of remarkable to watch in contrast to sort of perhaps what we have seen in places like Romania. It seems like the polls have been getting narrower and narrower and really kind of coming to the point where there's a hair in it, really, between these two men, and very, very different options. And I kind of find that really interesting, slightly coming off what Charles said, of the fact that you've had this sort of MAGA endorsement of the right-wing candidate, which I think in other places has been off-putting. I'm not sure it has been so off-putting in Poland. It's quite interesting. It's coming into quite a different mood and a different environment there. So it's going to be really interesting what happens. Probably will surprise no one by saying I'm very much hoping that we scrape through without the far right coming in again. But we will have to see what happens. Poland will decide.
Thank you for that. The time in Tokyo is, 18:34. It's 11:34 in Helsinki, 9:34 here in London. We're going to none of those places apart from London. We're going to Istanbul now. Good morning, Hannah Lucinda Smith, Istanbul's Monocle's Istanbul correspondent. How's it looking where you are?
Yeah, it is. It is looking fine and bright, and certainly summer has come.
That is so nice to hear. Tell us what's happening where you are. I mean, we've been talking about potential strongmen in Europe. Guess what you want to talk about?
Yeah, not an unusual topic for me. So Erdogan, for the second time in the space of a decade, is talking about redrafting Turkey's constitution. The last time he did this was back in 2017. There was a highly controversial referendum where he managed to push through his plans to turn Turkey from a parliamentary democracy into a presidential system. Of course, he is the president. It gathered a huge amount of power in his hands. He's now talking about gathering together some legal experts to redraft the constitution again. He said that those reforms hadn't gone far enough. Now, he, of course, says, this is about, the good of the country. Other people point to the fact that he's now in the second of 2 terms. Turkey, like many places, has a 2-term limit for its presidents. This is the 3rd term he's served. He managed to get around that before by redrafting the constitution. He said that, when the new constitution came in 2018 and he was voted into office again, he said, OK, well, this resets my term. So clearly, if he manages to do this again before the next elections, which are scheduled for 2028, that would be a huge boon for him. He would be able to do the same thing again.
This is not just, is this just about sort of Erdogan trying to get re-elected, or are there other changes that he wants the constitution to push Turkey towards?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, if you talk to kind of anybody really in Turkey, be they from the opposition, be they constitutional experts, or be they people, close to Erdogan, they'll all tell you that Turkey's constitution is not particularly good. It was drawn up in 1980 after a military coup, so it was done in a period of junta rule, and it hasn't been completely rewritten since then. It's sort of just been tinkered with. So there is an argument that it does need to be completely sort of redrafted from scratch. And also something else that Erdogan is very, very likely to play on here is the fact that there is a new peace process with the Kurdish militia, the PKK. He could, in one sense, kill 2 birds with 1 stone here and use this new constitution to try and bring in some more social civil rights for the Kurdish minority here, therefore kind of cementing any renewed support that he's had from that part of the country. So in that way as well, it could be very, very useful to him.
Tell us, if you could, bring us an update on Ekrem İmamoğlu, who was arrested and detained in March, I should say. What has happened to him and his supporters?
Yeah, so it was late March that the Mayor of Istanbul, Ekrem İmamoğlu, was arrested. He is still in prison. He's faced his initial court hearings. There were two allegations against him. One was about corruption within the Istanbul municipality. That is the charge that's kind of going forward. The other was related to terrorism charges. Again, a kind of charge that's constantly levelled against opponents of Erdogan. That's been kind of put on the back burner. It's not been dropped. The investigation is still open, but no charges have been brought. But they're really, the judicial system is really pushing ahead with these corruption charges. Just in the past week, we had a 4th wave of arrests of officials from the municipality. So in fact, it's not just Ekrem İmamoğlu. It's also hundreds of people who worked around him. And certainly, when I'm talking with people who worked, either, very closely alongside İmamoğlu in the mayor's office, or just more broadly within the municipality, in culture roles, in social roles, they're all incredibly worried that at some point those roundups could come to them.
And in the meantime, with Istanbul without a mayor, how is it faring?
Yeah, I mean, in some sense, it's sort of business as usual. A replacement mayor has been voted in by the council in the Istanbul City Council. Of course, people who voted for İmamoğlu as their mayor can still consider him their mayor. He's obviously now disbarred from office, not only because of the charges against him, but also because he was stripped of his degree in the lead up to his arrest. So that debars him from public office. But, Istanbul also has problems that sort of transcend politics. And one of those has become really, really apparent over the past couple of weeks. We've had two huge water cuts in the city, affecting huge parts of the city, lasting, in one case, for the best part of a day, no water at all. And really, this is a sign of just how badly the infrastructure in this city is creaking. Istanbul, like many places in the Mediterranean region, is suffering from really low rainfall and drought. We're constantly getting to kind of critical levels in the reservoirs around Istanbul. But that's not the problem here. I had a quick look at the reservoir levels when these cutouts happened, and they're actually quite full at the moment. The problem is that no one really knows how many people there are in Istanbul. Like in any major city, London included, there are a huge amount of undocumented people here in this city. The official population is 16 million. There's been reports previously commissioned by the municipality that have said, 16 million is the absolute maximum population that the infrastructure of this city can support. But, estimates, and often the municipality uses water consumption as the estimate for what the real population is. Estimates are 20, 25 million. So you're talking a far bigger population really than the city is built for, and it's really beginning to show.
And it does need something like that, needs major critical infrastructure overhaul, which takes decades, and for that you need a master plan. Is there a sense that any of that is on the way?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that Imamoglu was doing when he was in office, he set up a department that was focused on planning, focused on urban city planning, which is the thing that Istanbul absolutely lacks. The way of development in this city is utterly privatized and often complete without a plan, and also riddled with corruption. So, the main thing that people complain about here in Istanbul is the absolute lack of green space. It's so rare to find a park. And that's, bad for quality of life. It's also incredibly bad in a city that's on fault lines and is, expecting a major earthquake. But here's the problem. It's not just about Imamoglu's arrest. It's that mayorships here are so politicized. And often, as Erdogan did when he was mayor of the city, and also as Imamoglu was doing, what mayors do in Istanbul is they use this as a kind of platform to propel themselves, to a national platform, prepare themselves perhaps for national office. That's what Imamoglu was doing before he was arrested. He has been selected as the opposition's presidential candidate for the next elections. And, often the sort of technocratic day-to-day running of the city falls by the wayside.
Hannah Lucinda Smith in Istanbul. Thank you so much for joining us on Monocle on Sunday. It's Emma Nelson here, bringing you an hour of lively conversation. Thanks to Alex von Tunzelmann and Charles Hacker sitting around the table. You both perked up a bit when I said that. How are you getting on? Anything that you've spotted in the papers today? We've had a look at Elon Musk and his departure, but
yes, I'm absolutely enjoying this story in the FT about money spraying in Nigeria. So to give you some background on this, it's become very fashionable in Nigeria at parties and so forth, weddings, but also actually just sort of out for an evening to spray people with money. Now, what this means is it's the sort of thing you might have seen in American rap music videos, is to have a big pile of banknotes and flick them at someone who's sort of dancing.
Happens to me all the time.
Making it rain around this person.
It used to happen to me a lot more often.
Exactly. I mean, obviously, we'll all be at this later.
We're at it now.
Yes,
you just can't
indeed,
see it.
Sadly, the magic of radio, you can't actually see us all spraying each other with banknotes right now. Anyway, the FT informs me soberly that this is a Yoruba tradition which emerged in the 20th century. But it is now illegal in Nigeria, and you can actually go to prison for up to 6 months for money spraying.
Why?
Well, they've got issues with their currency, with the naira, and that it's been sort of devalued a bit and so forth. And this appears to be connected to that. But the concern, because money spraying doesn't really directly affect the value of a currency, but the concern is that it's disrespectful to the currency because it's being sprayed, it's being trodden on, it's lying on the floor. And there seems to be some concern that this is sort of just not making people take the currency very seriously. So if you go to a nice party in Nigeria, you've now got to be very careful about spraying the money. And we've got some people in the piece saying, well, I don't care, I'm going to do it anyway. It's our tradition, so, they can suck it up. Some people have now changed and are now spraying with US dollars instead. So this is also a possibility.
And that's a better reason to turn up.
Indeed. I mean, although actually I suppose the US dollar is worth about the same as 1,000 Nigerian naira, isn't it? So, so basically it's quite similar note values. And yes, and then some people saying, well, we hate it anyway and we're quite glad that you can't do it anymore.
It's also, as the FT has raised in an excellent article, it says that quite a lot of Nigerians aren't really impressed with this decision to deploy valuable police resources to effectively tell people to stop having fun.
What the FT is pointing towards is one of the great ironies of prosecuting people for enjoying themselves at a celebration and partaking in a local tradition, and that is that the police are sort of overlooking one of the other great traditions of Nigeria, which is that it is one of the world's most corrupt countries. And what the police need to be doing is they need to be cracking down on abuse of the naira in the fact that it's passed around in satchels among business people and among politicians and between the two and among the two. And so, the sort of individuals who've been thrown in jail for celebrating at a party are looking at politicians and business people who are spraying naira at each other and getting off scot-free. And so the FT is saying that, look, we're sort of, killing a fly with a sledgehammer, and we're directing the sledgehammer in the wrong direction in the first place.
Alex, you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that rather sums it up. I mean, yes, absolutely. There's this. I don't think this is going to have a great deal of effect on the Nigerian currency, and I'm not sure it's even going to have a great effect on Nigerian culture because, as I say, it seems like there's quite a lot of defiance and annoyance about this. I think perhaps the sort of slightly bigger issues as well as corruption are, obviously, like everywhere else, Nigeria is dealing with the new US tariffs. And also they're sort of, taking a few unusual measures mentioned in the piece. They blocked crypto exchanges last year for currency manipulation and detained 2 visiting executives from the US company Binance. So there's a lot happening in Nigeria, and we'll see how that goes.
Indeed. Chuck, let's move on to another story that you wanted to talk to us as we sit knee deep in cash.
So my eye was caught by, so a few days ago, the World Health Organization came out with new guidance on alcohol.
Right.
And the wording of the World Health Organization's report is it says that risks start from the first drop, and has gone so far as to say that really having one alcoholic beverage per year
We're
is
talking one glass.
That's one glass of wine, one glass of beer, one vodka martini, that one glass of an alcoholic beverage a year is already damaging to your health. So what I find quite astonishing is how they can actually establish that. I mean, as not necessarily a very expert scientist, I wonder how you can pinpoint that very drop to be as damaging as walking down a busy street or eating that extra ham sandwich or doing that thing that we're all not supposed to do. Well, precisely right. And so when you put this all in the context of everything that we do that is hazardous to our health, including crossing the street, it seems a bit maximalist. But what the World Health Organization has said, and I'm getting all of this from a column from Janan Ganesh, who's one of my favorite columnists and who's taken against this advice in his own interesting way. But what the World Health Organization said is that if alcohol were invented today, it would be a banned substance and would be prohibited on health grounds, and it would never pass sort of the safety testing that most new products have to go through to be let loose on the market. What Janan Ganesh is telling us actually is that he does think that people are drinking less. And what he says is his column is entitled A Drinker's Case Against Drinking. And he said he is not going to be following World Health Organization advice and limiting himself to one drink a year, although he has observed, and I think this is something that maybe all of us have observed in our own comings and goings from bars and parties, and that is that the maximum amount of alcohol that we're all consuming these days is indeed dropping And there's probably nothing wrong with that.
There's an interesting element to this article, which isn't just about the health implications. It's actually whether you can quantify the value of drinking in terms of your productivity and indeed whether it was actually ever worth it. And he has this wonderful idea of saying, yes, alcohol does enhance a moment. It can make an evening more fun. But in actual fact, when you just look at what it does in terms of the next morning when you're not quite there, or it also, it's cost you money, or you just don't feel so great, actually that can make you less productive. It's a really tricky balance to strike, isn't it? Because people who drink find enjoyment in drinking, and does everybody have to sit down and say, what is the value of absolutely every single moment of life? How productive can I be?
That sounds like a very depressing
It's
way
so
to
sad.
live, doesn't
It's so
it?
sad.
I mean, I think that there is indeed, of course, a balance here. I mean, you don't want to be addled every single day and sort of unable to do your job. Ideally, one has a little less alcohol than that. But I also think that, yes, possibly not everything you do in your life needs to be 100% good for you. And perhaps some enjoyment is actually permissible at some points. I mean, I do think there's a way in which I understand what the World Health Organisation is saying, which is that, I mean, just as any cream cake will damage you, yes, a glass of wine is better for you to have a glass of water. Of course it is. But at the same time, I think there's a bit of a danger that the advice gets so impossible, 1 glass a year, that actually people just go, well, forget that. I'm just going to do whatever I think, because that's obviously completely impossible to stick to and to have a social life in much of the world. Of course, it does depend where you are. Plenty of the world does socialise without alcohol, but certainly in Western and indeed Eastern Europe, that would be quite tricky.
I mean, the difficulties I think we face with this is if you have Alex's cream cake, you probably will be able to do your job the next morning. And the focus in this article is, whatever you end up achieving, and I'm quoting him here, you would have achieved more without alcohol. And it suddenly becomes down to, you're rolling your eyes brilliantly, Charles. Yeah, that idea of what have you achieved today? Could you have done it better if you'd been sober?
There are certain things I do better when I'm not sober. As an achievement, there are achievements and there are achievements. And again, I think, that truth lies in balance. And that is, I think we probably all do know when we've had too much to drink. And I think that we probably all do have, an angel sitting on one shoulder and a devil sitting on the other. And sometimes they're fighting it out when we're sitting at the bar or we're sitting at a dinner party. But I really think that, first of all, the level of stress that controlling my alcoholic beverage intake to 1 beverage a year would induce would probably be the thing to kill me rather than the alcohol itself.
Because what if it was the wrong time?
Well, you've got 1 shot a year. Do you do it on your birthday? Do you do it on New Year's Eve?
You do it at 5 to midnight on New Year's Eve because that's the one time that you're going to be. That's it. There's no more time left. It's like using up all your token.
Well, then you can have your second alcoholic beverage a few moments after New Year's Eve, and then you've had 2 in a row, and you're really living large, according to the World Health Organization. Look, I think that to the extent that a bevy or 2 enhances our ability to relax, it sometimes enhances our ability to socialize. Being social and being relaxed are also quality of life enhancers. And I really do think that the sort of the American prohibitionist Carrie Nation, who went around sort of axing the storefronts of places that sold alcohol during Prohibition. I think that we really need fewer of those sorts of preachers in our life. And as Janan Ganesh said, look, let's bring down the amount of this slightly toxic substance that we ingest, but not to a ridiculous minimum.
There's this thing, isn't there? If you tell something, and anybody who sort of tried to tell a teenager to come off their phone, they're just going to go and hide away and look at their phone even longer and probably look at nastier things for longer periods. So if someone keeps telling you don't drink, does everyone just do the same?
I think there is a bit of a danger of that. There was another report this week that actually, Brits are drinking less. Drink is kind of coming down as a thing. And, there's a lot of reasons for that. And one product of that has been that there's been a boom in dessert bars across the UK. So what these are is kind of restaurants that only serve
pudding,
sundaes and, you know, sort of waffles and all this sort of stuff. And it was presented quite uncritically in the report I read as, you know, well, this is obviously much better because it's not alcohol. But then I looked up what at Creams, a chocolate fudge volcano, whatever it is, sundae, that has 829 calories. That's the same as 4 pints of Guinness. Now, I'm not suggesting that you should have 4 pints of Guinness, which will
half a sundae and 2 Guinnesses.
Yes, I mean, you know, maybe that may be a compromise. But I mean, I'm not suggesting, you know, and also obviously much worse to drive home after the 4 Guinnesses. I'm not suggesting that this has no problem. But I am saying that
you might need a bigger car if you keep eating the sundaes.
That's rather the issue. And I think obesity is also a massive killer, and possibly sort of switching. You know, you can also go to a pub now, of course, and have non-alcoholic beers, which is a very nice way to socialise if you don't want to, you know, feel the ill effects of alcohol. It's much better these days in terms of what is available for people who don't want to drink. That I'm not sure that actually replacing this with massive quantities of sugar is really that much better.
All right, so we've got to... So we've now got the chance. We have to open a bad-for-you bar. So we've got a pudding bar. I'm going to have an opening gambit. I'm going to open a crisps bar.
There we go.
I'm going to open a bar where you can bring dogs.
Well, as long as they fit under your seat.
Yeah.
To eat? No.
No. As companions. No, I suppose the pets are allowed in most pubs, aren't they?
Yeah, no, we're fine with that one.
Pubs with gardens. I mean, but since we began the conversation talking about having dogs on airplanes, which I think is a slightly uncomfortable proposition, I think we should have pubs and restaurants and more public places that allow pets. I was always a big fan, although it never happened, of being able to bring dogs to work. And I think that if we're going to open up venues that do things that are bad for you.
Are you going to make it better by making sure you can? When I've ordered my 13 packets of crisps, I can just stroke a lovely dog and it'll make me feel better.
The one thing I will not be advocating for is a return of smoking to all of these venues. We chased cigarette smoke out of bars and out of restaurants, and I think that is an absolute net positive, and I think that's something that we should remind ourselves periodically, how much more pleasant it is to be in all of those environments without cigarette smoke.
How about you? What are you bringing a bad-for-you bar around?
Well, there's so many wonderful things we could have in a bad-for-you bar, couldn't we? I think it should probably have a few sort of high-stakes events as well, perhaps a roller coaster attached to it, so that we can really feel the fear around it.
So what have we consumed before we strap ourselves into the roller coaster?
I think we should probably consume the things after the roller coaster. Although if you do go to, these sort of, they have late nights at many of the theme parks in Florida now, sort of Halloween type events for adults, and they sort of hand you shots as you get on this thing. And I have to say, I think that's a bit of a risk. I think I'd stay away from that. But, since you want a bad-for-you bar, where we can really ramp it up.
What you've done, you've not actually given us anything that's bad for you. A dog is really good for you, and a roller coaster is fine for you. It's I don't know what it. I really don't.
Well,
know
I mean, how many bad things do you want? I mean, I'm not going to advocate an illegal drugs bar. I mean, that seems like a very bad idea indeed. I'll get a call from the police.
Finally, just very quickly, let's touch on the idea of France trying to ban children from hospitality venues. Some might say that's a bad for you or a good for you bar, depending on which way you're coming at this. What are your thoughts on this, Alex?
Well, this is a story that there is a private member's bill coming in France to ban people from banning children. You have to slightly think your way around the many negatives.
The double negative.
Exactly. So, I mean, what's happened in recent years, there's been a bit of an explosion of adults-only hospitality venues, hotels and, restaurants and all sorts of things. And this minister from the Socialist Party in France has said that a representative of the Socialist Party in France has said that he thinks this is very anti-family. That it's sort of, that it's very hostile and that this shouldn't happen. And it's prompted quite a debate. I mean, I find this very interesting in that I posted something a while ago about it on social media, and I was really interested that people had extraordinarily strong views, and they didn't always map onto whether those people were parents or not in a simple way. In fact, some parents were really quite insistent that they needed some child-free places to go when they offloaded their children onto perhaps a babysitter or someone else.
Chuck, we've got 10 seconds. What are your thoughts on this?
If I were voting in the French Parliament, I would be a representative of the grumpy old man party. And I would probably say that having a few quiet child-free places is not a bad thing.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And my thanks to all my guests on today's programme, Alex von Tunzelmann and Charles Hacker, Hannah Lucinda Smith and Tyler Brûlé. Thanks to the producer, Desiree Bandley, and our studio engineer, David Stevens. I'm Emma Nelson. Monocle on Sunday's back next week. But for now, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Goodbye. Thank you very much for listening.